Hello and welcome to this overview of S110 Fiscal Stewardship. Here are some trivia terms for you the next time you happen to be a guest on Jeopardy! You can now impress your friends and relatives by telling them about the difference between the words fiscal and finance. Here are your takeaways for this lesson. The bottom line is that money buys readiness. But what do we mean by that? As a field grade officer, the term fiscal stewardship should remind you this means getting the most readiness for the money we spend. Success in this sense doesn't mean racking up a bunch of obligations for your battalion or brigade. It means putting each dollar to use and not leaving anything on the table. Accordingly, your unit's cost drivers and budget priorities should reflect an emphasis on readiness and mission accomplishment. When you go shopping, you try to avoid full price and save money whenever possible. Perhaps you cut coupons or eagerly wait for sales. Maybe you sat in line outside Best Buy waiting for their Black Friday sale. Why do we do this? Obviously, we all want to maximize our limited household budgets. In a similar way, the goal or ultimate objective of fiscal stewardship is to buy as much readiness or capability as possible. Wasting money and resources has a negative impact on readiness. Of course, there is a catch. Resources are finite. The goal is to prioritize and to distinguish between wants and needs. From the read-ahead materials, you should have gathered that fiscal stewardship has been a topic of concern for quite some time. President Eisenhower's quotation on this slide and the Honorable David M. Walker's remarks in your S110 RB reading emphasize that fiscal stewardship is vital to sustaining the force. We want to optimize buying power within the Army by effective and efficient obligation of funds. We are going to show you how to do this from the battalion to the brigade level. Before we get too far along, here are some useful terms that you may have picked up during your readings. An obligation occurs as soon as an expense is incurred. This could be a completed order in GCSS Army, an authorization for travel approved in DTS, or a contract award. These actions immediately reduce the unit's available funds by the amount of the obligation. A de-obligation happens when orders are canceled, approved travel doesn't happen or comes in below budget, or when contracts are terminated or below budget. Timely de-obligations allow an organization to free up previously obligated funds for use against different requirements. Period of availability refers to the timeframes within which the Army spends money. We sometimes refer to these phases as the budget years, expiring years, or the canceling years. Anyway, the unexpired phase. During this time period, the budget authority is available for new obligations and for disbursement. This phase lasts a set number of years. You know, for example, that military construction funds are typically good for 5 years. Expired phase. During this time period, we can't make new obligations, but the money is still available for disbursement. In other words, when the bills come in, the unit can still pay these debts. Canceled phase. After the last expired year, the account is closed and the balances are canceled. The authority to disperse funds is canceled and is no longer available for any purpose. Any old bills with valid obligations that show up after the account is closed must be obligated against and dispersed from monies that are currently available, that is, in the unexpired phase. Obviously, this is not good because we lose money needed for readiness this year or during the budget year. Okay. So we know that money buys readiness. We also know that fiscal stewardship should focus on getting the most readiness for the money we spend. Let's take a few moments to talk about CAER, the Command Accountability and Execution Review program. CAER is the U.S. Army's premier fiscal stewardship program. CAER provides commanders with visibility of the command fiscal health that did not exist prior to the implementation of this program. It holds leaders at every echelon responsible and accountable for stewardship of tax dollars they receive and provides them with the tools to be successful. CAER focuses on 3 areas of financial management: operations and management, de-obligations. Don't forget that O&M is only available for 1 year. When de-obligated, these funds are not legally available for incurring new purchases. Under execution of the O&M budget. This means ensuring all funding provided by Congress is applied to top priority requirements in the fiscal year, and they directly affect Army readiness. Uncollected reimbursables. When the Army provides services to other agencies, reimbursement for those services ensures Army money supports Army priorities. Take a moment to review these goals. The fact that you are receiving this class was not an arbitrary decision made by CGSC. So why is this important to the Army? By optimizing the Army's purchasing power, CAER enables commanders to maximize every dollar they receive to build readiness and lethality. Prudent execution of the Army's budget allows the Army to pursue its modernization goals. These actions enable the Army to support the National Defense Strategy by optimizing the value of every dollar. Take a moment to focus your attention on the graph in the upper left corner of the slide. I know it may be a little hard to read. You might want to refer to your own slides from Blackboard. Anyway, the Chief of Staff of the Army is briefed bi-weekly on this chart, or one very much like it, located in the upper left. The bars represent the total spend plans for that particular month for the 4 major commands. That's FORSCOM, AMC, AFC, and TRADOC. The green line represents the actual obligations for that month for the 4 major commands. Here, the CSA evaluates whether the major commands are obligated to what they said they would. That is, their obligations are the obligations they put on their spend plans. The black line represents the total disbursements by month for each major command. Here, the CSA is evaluating the disbursements against the obligations, that is, the green line. The difference between the green line and the black line represents potential buying power the unit has. The goal is to bring the green and black lines closer. This is done by aggressively identifying transactions that have finalized and still have obligations in excess of disbursements. If transactions have been completely dispersed, then a de-obligation needs to occur so funding can be reutilized in the current year. This is what we call data analytics. Why do you think senior leaders focus on this slide? I guess the bottom line is that these data help inform current and future decisions. So how do you think CAER is doing? Well, the green numbers here represent buying power recouped through the CAER program. Given what you've learned about resource management and operational contract support from S108 and S109, why do you think the net de-obligations are so much smaller in the more recent fiscal years? This slide was in your student reading. Once again, it might be hard to read on your video screen, so you might want to refer to your slides or the reading. What do you think is the most important lesson from this slide? Is it simply the loss of purchasing power? Why do you think our overseas contingency operations, or OCO O&M funds, have a much higher de-obligation rate than our base O&M funds? This is a similar slide to the one in your student reading. Take a minute to think about the guidance that you see on the slide. What do you think the most important lesson from this slide is? Well, to one extent or the other, all of these things are important. For my 2 cents, I'd say that setting your priorities should be your foremost goal. Why? I think this gives you the freedom of maneuver to make informed recommendations to your commander on those things that should be cut. Of course, there isn't always a clear connection between cost drivers and those expenditures with the biggest impact on unit readiness. So, these are the primary cost drivers for many battalions and brigades in the Army. We covered a lot of this during our resource management class, S109. In case you've forgotten, executive officers, SPOs, S4s, S8s, they all play significant roles in this process. And of course, your S8 can help you get information about past expenditures, but it will be up to you to expend the mental energy to figure out the why behind these costs. As we've discussed, obligations occur when the government enters into a legally binding agreement to pay for a good or service. Units can deobligate money whenever the actual cost of a requirement is less than the amount the unit set aside for the requirement due to quotes and estimates. As you can see, the difference between what was obligated and what was actually spent is quite significant here. Deobligations can occur throughout the fiscal year, returning funding to the unit for its use for other purposes. However, operations and management appropriated funds may only be used for new obligations within their period of availability, which is 1 fiscal year. In our example, this unit can spend this $88,000 if they reobligate it before the end of the fiscal year. Deobligations after the 30th of September occur in the next fiscal year. These deobligated funds are not available for new obligations and represent lost buying power for the unit's current requirements. Units can use these deobligated funds to adjust existing obligations that occurred during the previous fiscal year. However, that's not the ideal outcome. In our example, this unit stands to lose almost $90,000 if they just leave it on the table and not put it to good use before the fiscal year ends. Here's another way to look at things. Our process starts with understanding the commander's priorities. The commander's guidance is transferred into our training plan. The staff figures out how to meet these requirements. The draft spend plan goes back to the commander for approval, and the process starts all over again. I think the key takeaway here is that fiscal stewardship is a deliberate process. It is a military operation and must be treated as such. This slide helps you understand how you might crosswalk the principles of mission command with fiscal discipline. Okay, let's bridge the gap between mission command and fiscal stewardship. All echelons of commanders should use mission command to guide fiscal discipline. Understanding and accepting prudent risk is, pretty self-explanatory. Disciplined initiative is inherent to fiscal discipline itself. Competence is certainly tied to cost management as well as effectiveness and efficiency. Mutual trust goes both ways and is integral to sound decision-making, and we could go on and on. Subordinates need to be educated in how to utilize fiscal discipline in achieving the commander's intent of maximizing purchasing power, managing costs efficiently and effectively, and minimizing deobligations in the canceling years. As a field grade officer, you are both the student and the educator when it comes to making this work smoothly. After all, fiscal discipline is everyone's responsibility. Getting to the source of the challenge at the unit level is key to a holistic Army solution. Okay, here are your S110 takeaways again. As you review this slide, think about the following questions. What is the CAER program and what is its purpose? What is de-obligation? Try and think of an example of how this could be used to buy readiness. What is the role of the Brigade S8? Who else should be concerned about fiscal stewardship? And finally, an unsolicited plea for your assistance. We need your help to get better. Please scan this code with your smartphone. You will be doing next year's class a big favor. Thank you very much.